Hey guys, tonight we are drifting back in time, not to a grand palace or a thundering battlefield, but to the quiet, endless expanse of the 13th century Mongolian steppe. You're there, right now. Picture it. There is no screen in front of you, no hum of a refrigerator in the other room. There is only the sky, a dome of impossible blue so vast, it feels like it could swallow you whole, and the grass, an ocean of pale green and dusty gold that stretches to every single horizon. The wind is the only constant sound, a low, mournful whisper that never ever stops. It whips your hair across your face and chills the back of your neck. It's a place of profound emptiness and stark minimalist beauty. And you, my friend, have to eat. You probably won't survive this, by the way. Your modern stomach and your need for 3 square meals a day would be a hilarious liability out here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always nice to know you're out there. And while you're at it, post where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's fascinating to see where these stories land. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You feel a profound sense of isolation settling over you. A quiet dread that bubbles up from your gut. The sheer scale of this place is an assault on the senses. There are no trees to break the monotony, no buildings to give you a sense of distance. A distant herd of gazelle might as well be on another planet. This is the world that created the Mongol warrior, an environment so demanding and so unforgiving that it stripped away everything but the essential. Survival here isn't about comfort, it's about efficiency. It's about movement. To stand still on the steppe is to wither and die. The seasons are brutal and absolute. The winters are a deep, soul-crushing cold, with temperatures plummeting to levels that can freeze a man solid in his saddle. The summers are a blistering, arid heat that can bake the moisture from your body before you even realize you're thirsty. This landscape is the why behind everything we're about to discover. You can't just plow a field and plant some wheat here. The soil is too poor. The growing season too short and unpredictable. You can't build a granary and stockpile food for the winter, because your herds, your entire livelihood, need to constantly move to find fresh pasture. The Mongol way of life was one of perpetual motion, a nomadic dance dictated by the needs of their animals. And when your entire world is on the move, your kitchen has to be on the move too. There are no pantries, no root cellars, no grocery stores just down the road. There is only what you can carry with you, what you can find, and what you can make from the few resources the steppe provides. This reality, this constant, grinding pressure, forced an unparalleled level of innovation in one specific area: portable food. The Mongols didn't just invent a few travel snacks, they perfected a complete mobile culinary system, a way of eating that allowed them to cross continents at a speed that terrified the settled world. Their empire, after all, would become the largest contiguous land empire in human history, stretching from the Sea of Japan to the plains of Hungary. An army, as the old saying goes, marches on its stomach. But what do you do when your army doesn't march but rides? And what if it needs to ride for thousands upon thousands of miles, through deserts, over mountains, and across enemy territory, without ever stopping for a leisurely supply train to catch up? You engineer a food source that is as rugged, as resilient, and as efficient as your warriors. You create sustenance that is lightweight, calorie-dense, and almost immune to spoilage. Some historians still argue whether the primary driver of Mongol expansion was a unified political ambition under Genghis Khan, or a desperate search for resources prompted by a sudden climate shift on the steppe. A period of intense cold and drought that made their traditional way of life almost impossible. Whatever the initial spark, their ability to feed themselves on these epic campaigns was the engine of their success. You look out at that horizon again. It's not just flat, it undulates, rising and falling in gentle, hypnotic waves of grass. It's a strange and disorienting effect. In fact, it's a documented phenomenon that some early travelers on the steppe, unused to the featureless rolling landscape, would experience a kind of motion sickness, a steppe sickness, similar to what sailors feel on the open ocean. It's a good reminder that this land has its own rules, its own physical and psychological challenges. It demands a different kind of human, one adapted to vastness, to scarcity, and to the relentless necessity of the road. Your stomach rumbles, a hollow, modern sound in this ancient quiet. You're starting to realize the problem. There are no berry bushes in sight, no fruit trees, no convenient rivers teeming with fish. There is just you, the wind, and the grass. The solution to your hunger is standing right beside you, patiently swishing its tail. And that's where our story of Mongol food really begins. Not with a recipe, but with an animal. You turn and look at your companion, the animal that has been standing so patiently beside you this whole time. This is not the tall, elegant steed of European knights or the sleek, fiery Arabian of desert legends. This is a Mongolian horse, and it is a masterpiece of environmental engineering. It's small, almost pony-sized, with a large head, short, sturdy legs, and a famously stubborn temperament. Its coat is a thick, shaggy affair that looks a bit unkempt, and its mane is a tangled mess from the constant wind. It looks less like a war machine and more like a very grumpy, fluffy lawnmower. But you are looking at the single most important piece of technology the Mongol people ever possessed. This horse is your transportation, your weapon, your shelter, and most importantly, your mobile pantry. It is a walking, breathing, four-legged solution to the problem of survival on the steppe. First, consider its resilience. This animal can survive where others would perish. It has incredible stamina, capable of maintaining a steady trot for hours on end. In the winter, when the world is buried under a thick blanket of snow, the Mongol horse uses its hooves to dig through the frozen crust to find the dried grass beneath. This ability to forage for its own food, even in the harshest conditions, means you don't have to carry bulky fodder. It's a self-fueling engine in a land with no filling stations. This self-sufficiency is a critical advantage. While the supply lines of opposing armies would be stretched thin, struggling to haul wagons of grain for their larger, more delicate war horses, your mount simply grazes its way across the continent. You pat its neck, feeling the coarse, wiry hair under your hand. It barely acknowledges you, its focus entirely on the tufts of grass it's methodically chewing. But its true genius as a food source is that it provides sustenance without having to be consumed itself, at least not usually. The key is the mare. Your mount is a female, and like all mammals, she produces milk for her young. The Mongols, through centuries of careful observation, turned this biological fact into the cornerstone of their diet. A Mongol warrior would almost always ride a mare. During the day's travel, her foal would run alongside. At camp, the foal would be tied up nearby, but not so far that the mare wouldn't let down her milk. You and your fellow riders would then milk the mares, collecting the precious liquid that would be transformed into a variety of foods and drinks. This is the first and most vital product of your living larder, a renewable resource, a steady supply of protein and fat that moves with you. A single warrior on campaign would have a string of several horses, not just one. It's a well-documented historical fact that riders would keep 3, 4, or even 5 horses, rotating between them throughout the day. This wasn't a luxury. It was a matter of logistics. By switching mounts, you could ride at high speed for incredible distances, sometimes up to 100 miles in a single day, without exhausting any single animal. One horse would be ridden, while the others trotted along, unburdened. This system not only allowed for the famous lightning-fast movements of the Mongol armies, but also increased your food security. More mares meant more milk. It also meant you had backup. If one horse was injured or fell ill, you had others to rely on. It's a brutal calculus. You love these animals, you depend on them, but you also understand their practical value. In the direst of emergencies, when all other options were gone, the horse itself could become food. This was always a last resort, a heartbreaking decision, but the option was there. Your partner in survival could, in the end, make the ultimate sacrifice. Historians and equine specialists still debate whether the incredible endurance of the Mongol horse was a product of a unique genetic lineage honed over millennia, or simply the result of a brutal but effective culling process imposed by the harsh steppe environment. The truth is likely a combination of both, nature and nurture working in concert. The weak simply didn't survive the winters. The slow were left behind. Over countless generations, This relentless pressure forged an animal perfectly suited to its world, an animal whose very physiology was intertwined with the survival of its human companions. You watch as your horse rips another clump of tough grass from the dry soil. There is no sentimentality in the action, just a quiet, relentless efficiency. It is converting the only resource this vast landscape has in abundance, cellulose, into things you can actually use: transportation, warmth, and most critically, calories. Your relationship with this animal is deeper than simple ownership. It's a symbiotic partnership, a pact made against the vast, indifferent emptiness of the steppe. You are its guide and protector. It is your legs and your lifeline. And as we're about to see, the first thing you're going to make from its gift of milk will be just as tough and resilient as the horse itself. But first, you need something a little more solid, something you can chew on for hours while you ride. The need for something solid, something that can sustain you through a long day in the saddle, is primal. While the mare's milk provides a steady, renewable resource, it doesn't have the sheer caloric density of muscle and fat. The problem, as always on the steppe, is one of time and distance. A successful hunt or the necessary slaughter of a sheep provides a sudden glut of fresh meat. It's a feast, a moment of abundance. But in a world without refrigeration, abundance is a ticking clock. The meat will begin to turn in a matter of days, attracting flies and predators, its life-giving energy threatening to decay into poison. You can't afford to waste a single calorie, so you must transform this perishable bounty into something that can endure as long as you do. You must make Borts. You watch the process, a ritual perfected over 1,000 years of practice. An animal, perhaps a cow or a less favored horse, has been brought down. The butchering is swift, precise, and utterly without waste. Every part of the creature will be used: the skin for leather, the bones for tools and broth, the organs for an immediate meal. But it's the large muscles of the legs and back that are destined for preservation. You take a knife, its blade sharpened on a smooth river stone. The meat is cool to the touch. You begin to cut, not across the grain like a modern chef seeking tenderness, but with it. You slice the muscle into long, thick strips, each one maybe 2 or 3 inches wide and a couple of feet long. This isn't about creating delicate morsels. It's about creating durable planks of protein. The shape is critical. It needs to be thick enough to hold a lot of substance, but thin enough to allow the wind to do its work. Once the strips are cut, they are hung. You find a spot with good airflow, perhaps on a rope strung between 2 carts or simply draped over the latticework of your gear, your portable felt home. The steppe itself is your dehydrator. The air is intensely dry, and the ever-present wind is relentless. These 2 factors work together, pulling the moisture from the meat day after day. You watch as the strips slowly transform. The vibrant red darkens to a deep, dusky brown, almost black. They shrink, curling and twisting as they lose their water weight, becoming visibly smaller and more compact. After a week or 2, they are no longer soft or pliable. They are rigid, hard as wood. You can knock 2 pieces together and they make a dry clacking sound. This is Borts. It is not the soft, chewy, artificially flavored jerky you might find in a plastic bag today. This is a foodstuff reduced to its most elemental form. Trying to take a bite out of a raw strip would be a catastrophic mistake for your teeth, a battle your enamel would surely lose. This rock-hard state is its genius. By removing virtually all the water, you've removed the environment that bacteria and mold need to grow. The final product is shelf-stable for months, even years, if kept dry. It's also incredibly lightweight and compact. It's a well-known historical fact that an entire cow, once processed into Borts, could be condensed down to fit into a single large bladder or leather sack, weighing only about 10 kilograms. All the protein, all the essential nutrients of a 1,000-pound animal, could now be carried by a single warrior on a single horse. This is a logistical miracle. It's the secret to how Mongol columns could move so far, so fast without being tethered to slow, vulnerable supply wagons. Each warrior was, in effect, his own supply wagon. To make it even more portable, the dried Borts is often processed further. You take a few of the dried strips and using a heavy stone you pound them. You grind them down, shredding the tough fibers until they break apart into a coarse, fluffy powder, almost like a dark, meaty sawdust. This powder is then packed tightly into a cleaned animal bladder or a leather pouch. This is the original instant meal. Historians still argue whether the Mongols consistently salted their Borts. Salt was an incredibly valuable commodity on the much of the steppe, often acquired through trade rather than local production. While some accounts mention salting meat, many scholars believe the unique combination of the dry climate and constant wind was so effective at preservation that salt was an unnecessary luxury. The air itself was the primary preservative. You hold a handful of the meaty powder. It's light as dust and has a faint, savory smell. It seems like almost nothing, yet you know that this small pouch contains the energy to keep you riding for days. It is the fuel of conquest, a perfect food born from a perfect storm of necessity and environment. That pouch of powdered meat in your hand is potential energy, a promise of a future meal. But right now, it's about as edible as a bag of gravel. The very process that makes Borts so durable also makes it impossible to eat in its dried state. Its hardness is a lock, and water is the key. You are learning that Mongol cuisine is not about elaborate preparation. It's about ingenious rehydration. The simplest method is the most common. At the end of a long day's ride, or even during a brief midday halt, you swing down from your horse. You gather a few dry, plate-sized cakes of animal dung, the ubiquitous fuel of the treeless steppe called Aaruul. With a spark from your flint and steel, you have a small, surprisingly smokeless fire going in minutes. You pull a small pot from your saddlebag, perhaps made of bronze or iron. You fill it with water from a leather flask. Then you reach into your pouch of Borts and take a small pinch, maybe a tablespoon's worth of the meaty powder. You drop it into the water. At first, nothing seems to happen. The powder just swirls in the pot, making the water cloudy. But as it heats, a transformation begins. The water gradually darkens, taking on the rich brown color of a hearty broth. A savory, beefy aroma, intense and deeply satisfying, begins to rise with the steam. A welcome change from the clean, dusty smell of the wind. The tiny, desiccated fibers of muscle absorb the water, swelling and softening, returning to something resembling meat. In just a few minutes, you have a hot, nourishing soup. You pour it into your personal wooden bowl, cradle its warmth in your hands, and take a sip. It's salty, intensely savory, and warms you from the inside out. It's not a complex flavor, but it's honest and deeply fortifying. The rehydrated meat is a bit stringy, sure, but it's substantial. It's something to chew on. This basic broth is the canvas upon which a more complex meal could be painted if you had the ingredients. A few wild onions dug up during the day's ride could be chopped in, adding a pungent sweetness. A handful of millet obtained through trade could be added to make a thicker, more porridge-like stew. A dollop of rendered animal fat could be stirred in for a significant boost of calories, especially welcome in the freezing cold. This adaptability is what made Borts a true culinary Swiss Army knife. It could be a simple, quick broth for a lone rider, or it could be the foundation of a large communal pot bubbling over the evening fire. The famous Venetian traveler Marco Polo was astounded by this system. He wrote about how the Mongol warriors carried their provisions with them, primarily a dried milk paste in this powdered meat, allowing them to ride for 10 days at a time without needing to stop and cook a meal, subsisting entirely on their rations and the milk from their mares. But what if you didn't have time to stop or couldn't risk a fire? The Mongols had a solution for that too, and it's one of their most legendary innovations. Historians and culinary anthropologists still debate the exact nature of the saddle-tenderized meat. Was it a common practice for rehydrating Borts, or a more exaggerated tale describing how they merely transported the meat, with the softening effect being a minor secondary consequence? The principle, as it's told, is one of pure utilitarian genius. You take a small slab of the rock-hard Borts, place it in a flat leather bag with just a splash of water to get the process started, and then you place that bag under your saddle. And then you ride. For hours. The gentle heat from your horse's back, combined with the rhythmic pressure and friction from your own weight in the saddle, works on the meat all day long. The tough fibers are slowly massaged, the moisture is forced deep inside, and by the time you make camp for the night, The meat is tender enough to be gnawed on directly from the slab. It's the ultimate slow cooker, powered by the motion of your journey. Probably not a cooking method you'll see featured in any modern celebrity chef's cookbook, but out here, it's the difference between eating and going hungry. You now understand that Borts isn't just a food, it's a system. It's a way of carrying an entire larder in a small pouch. A testament to a philosophy where nothing is wasted and every challenge is met with a stark, practical solution. But meat is only one half of the equation. You also need the other product of the herd, the white gold of the steppe. You've seen how meat can be transformed, its essence captured and preserved against the ravages of time. Now you turn your attention to that other pillar of the steppe economy, the white gold that flows daily from your herds. Milk, primarily from your mares but also from sheep, goats, and even yaks, is a gift. It's a rich source of fat, protein, and vitamins, but it is a fleeting gift. In the summer heat, a pail of fresh milk will begin to sour and spoil in a matter of hours. It is life, but it is life on a deadline. Just like with meat, the challenge is not in acquiring the food, but in making it last. The solution is as ingenious as Borts, and the process begins with a simple, magical transformation. Controlled souring. You watch as the day's milk is collected, not into individual cups but poured together into a large leather bag or a cauldron. It's left in a warm spot, perhaps near the central fire of the gyre. A starter culture, a scoop of yogurt-like substance from a previous batch, might be stirred in to guide the process. Then you simply wait. Nature takes its course. The lactose in the milk begins to ferment, breaking down into lactic acid. This process, which would be called spoiling in your modern kitchen, is here called beginning. The milk visibly changes. It thickens and separates. You can see the liquid whey, thin and greenish yellow, separating from the thick white clumps of milk solids, the curds. This is the fundamental separation that makes preservation possible. The liquid whey will be drained off and used for other purposes, a story for another time. Your focus is on the solids. These curds are scooped out and poured into a loose weave fabric bag. The bag is tied shut and then pressed. This is a crucial step. You need to squeeze out every possible drop of the remaining whey, as any excess moisture is an invitation for spoilage. The bag of curds is placed between two flat wooden boards, and heavy river stones are piled on top, creating a makeshift press. For hours, the whey slowly weeps through the cloth, leaving the contents of the bag ever more dense and compact. When you finally open the bag, what's inside is no longer a soft curd, but a thick, sour white paste, like a very firm cream cheese. It has a clean, tangy smell that tingles in your nose. This paste is the raw material for Aaruul. You take a handful. It's cool and pliable. Now comes the artisanal part. The paste can be shaped in countless ways. You can roll it into little balls, press it into flat, cookie-sized discs, or extrude it through your fingers to create thin, noodle-like strands. Different families have their own preferred shapes, a kind of culinary signature passed down through generations. Some are even formed into charming little animal figures or geometric patterns, a treat for the children. Once shaped, the pieces are taken outside and laid carefully on a cloth or a wooden rack, placed on the sun-drenched roof of the gyre. And once again, you entrust your food to the sky. The same relentless sun and dry wind that created Borts now go to work on the milk solids. Day after day, you watch the Aaruul transform. The moisture evaporates, the shapes shrink and harden, and the pure white color deepens to a chalky off-white, sometimes a pale yellow, or even a light brown. After a week or so, they are no longer soft. They are rock hard. You pick one up. It feels like a small stone, light but incredibly dense. You tap it against your teeth and it makes a sharp click. Anthropologists still debate the primary purpose of Aaruul's extreme hardness. Was it purely a byproduct of the necessary dehydration for long-term preservation? Or was it an intentional feature designed to make it a slow-release food, forcing you to suck on it for hours, thereby staving off hunger pangs during long, monotonous rides? Either way, the result is a perfect travel snack. It is impervious to heat, resistant to mold, and will last for an entire season, if not longer. A warrior can fill a small leather pouch with these milk stones and have a ready source of vital nutrients for weeks. This isn't just a snack, It's a piece of compressed nutrition. The high concentration of calcium in Aaruul is a historical fact, providing a crucial element for strong bones and healthy teeth in a diet that often lacked leafy green vegetables. It's a vitamin pill carved from milk, a testament to the Mongol genius for turning the ephemeral into the everlasting. You now hold one of these milk stones in your palm. It's deceptively lightweight, its chalky surface smooth against your skin. Curiosity gets the better of you. You pop one of the smaller disc-shaped pieces into your mouth. For a moment, it's just a foreign object, a smooth, hard pebble on your tongue. There's no immediate flavor, just a cool, mineral sensation. You're tempted to bite down, but a memory of its rock-like hardness gives you pause. That would be a very bad idea. So you simply let it rest in your mouth, rolling it around with your tongue. Slowly, patiently, your saliva begins to do its work. The outer layer starts to dissolve, releasing the first wave of flavor. It's a surprising, powerful tang, an intense sourness that makes your jaw tingle and your eyes squint just a little. It's the concentrated essence of yogurt and buttermilk, a sharp, acidic note that is gradually mellowed by a faint, creamy, savory undertone. This is not a food meant to be devoured quickly. It's a slow-release energy source, a kind of Steppe hard candy. It might take you the better part of an hour to fully dissolve one small piece. During a long, monotonous ride, this is a welcome distraction. It keeps your mouth from getting dry and provides a tiny, steady trickle of calories and nutrients. The sour taste is also said to cut through the dust of the trail and quench your thirst more effectively than plain water. You can see the genius in it. It's a snack that forces you to be patient, a food that mirrors the slow, steady pace of a long journey. As a quirky side effect, the Mongols found that chewing or sucking on the hard curds helped keep their teeth clean. The abrasive, chalky texture would scrub away plaque, and the lactic acid was thought to have beneficial properties for gum health. It was a snack, a thirst quencher, and a toothbrush, all in one. Your dentist would probably have a very complicated opinion on the matter. But just like Borts, the use of Aaruul isn't limited to its solid form. Its versatility truly shines when you add heat and water. You're sitting by the evening fire, the chill of the steppe night beginning to creep into your bones. Someone drops a few pieces of Aaruul into a cup of hot water, or perhaps into the brick tea that is often brewing. You watch as the milk stones begin to soften and dissolve, clouding the water and turning it into a pale, opaque liquid. The sharp, sour smell softens, becoming something more akin to warm buttermilk. The resulting drink is tangy, comforting, and surprisingly refreshing. It's a way to have a warm, dairy-based drink, miles and days away from a fresh source of milk. This reconstituted milk liquid is also a key ingredient in cooking. It's the secret to balancing the intense, sometimes one-note flavor of a purely meat-based diet. You watch as a cook prepares the evening stew. A pot of water is set to boil, and a generous handful of Borts is thrown in. As the meat rehydrates and the rich, beefy broth forms, the cook adds a second ingredient, a handful of Aaruul. The milk stones dissolve, turning the dark broth into a creamy, lighter-colored soup. The transformation is not just visual, it's culinary. The sharp lactic tang of the Aaruul cuts through the greasy richness of the meat and fat. It adds a layer of complexity, a sour counterpoint that brightens the entire dish. The result is a hearty, savory, and slightly tangy stew, a sort of primordial beef stroganoff that is far more satisfying and balanced than either of its components would be alone. European observers like the Flemish missionary William of Rubruck, who visited the Mongol court in the 1250s, wrote in detail about these foods, describing with a mixture of fascination and mild disgust the sour milk products that were so central to the Mongol diet. Food historians still debate the regional variations in Aaruul recipes. Was the addition of wild berries or herbs to the milk paste before drying a widespread practice for flavor and nutrition? Or was it a rare, localized luxury reserved for specific tribes or ceremonial occasions? Looking into the communal pot, you see the brilliant synergy of the Mongol pantry. Their two cornerstone preserved foods, Borts and Aaruul, meat and milk, dried and reconstituted, working together to create a whole greater than the sum of its parts. But you remember the whey, the thin liquid drained from the curds. It wasn't thrown away. That would be wasteful. It was saved for a purpose that is perhaps the most famous and most potent of all Mongol creations. You now know that nothing from the herd is ever wasted. That thin, greenish whey drained from the curds, which might have seemed like a simple byproduct, is in fact a precious ingredient. It is a super concentrate of the very bacteria and yeasts needed to kickstart the most legendary of all steppe concoctions. This whey, along with pails of fresh milk drawn directly from the mares, is poured into a special vessel that is the heart of every Mongol household. It's called a kokur, a large, sturdy sack made from smoked cowhide, often suspended from the wooden lattice of the ger. The smoking process is vital. It makes the leather waterproof and imparts a unique flavor and antibacterial quality that is essential to the final product. Into this smoky, leathery incubator goes the milk. A starter culture, either the whey or a cupful of a previous day's brew, is added. And then the work begins. A long wooden paddle, the bulur, is plunged into the sack, and a rhythmic churning commences. This is not a task for one person, but a communal duty, a constant, low-level hum of activity in the camp. Anyone who passes the kokur, a child, a warrior returning from patrol, a woman heading out to the herd, is expected to stop and give the paddle a few dozen vigorous plunges. The sound is a steady, percussive beat, the heartbeat of the camp, a soft sloshing thump-thump-thump that can go on for hours, sometimes thousands of strokes in a single day. This constant agitation is the secret. It's not just about mixing, it's about introducing air, which encourages the yeasts to work their magic, converting the milk sugars, the lactose, into not just lactic acid, but also carbon dioxide and a small but significant amount of alcohol. You are watching a remarkable feat of microbiology, perfected by people who knew nothing of microbes. They knew only the process, the sacred rhythm of the churn. Historians and microbiologists debate the precise origin and stability of the unique symbiotic yeast bacteria culture used for Airag. Was it a naturally occurring culture found in the specific wood used for the churning paddles? Or was it a carefully cultivated strain that was preserved and passed down through generations, much like a precious family heirloom? Whatever its origin, the result is a bubbling, living liquid. After a day or two of fermentation and churning, it is ready. It is Airag. Someone takes a ladle, dips it into the smoky depths of the kokur, and offers you a full bowl. You take it with both hands, a sign of respect. The liquid is thin, the color of milky dishwater, with a light froth of bubbles on the surface. You raise it to your nose. The smell is challenging. It's sharply sour, yeasty like bread dough, with an underlying smoky, leathery note from the bag. It's the smell of a barn and a brewery all at once. You hesitate for a moment, then take your first sip. The sensation is a shock to the palate. First, there is the fizziness, a lively tingle on your tongue from the carbonation. Then comes the taste, an assertive, yogurt-like sourness but thinner and more complex. And just behind it, there is a definite, if mild, alcoholic kick. The finish is clean, leaving your mouth feeling surprisingly refreshed. It's certainly an acquired taste, a far cry from the sweet, pasteurized milk of your own time. You take another sip, and then another. The initial shock gives way to a growing appreciation. It is, in a word, alive, and it is incredibly nutritious. This fizzy, sour beverage is a powerhouse of vitamins and minerals. Historically, armies and navies on long campaigns were often crippled by scurvy, a debilitating disease caused by a lack of vitamin C. The Mongols, however, rarely suffered from it. Airag is remarkably rich in vitamin C, as well as a host of B vitamins, essential minerals, and probiotics from the fermentation. It's a health drink, a food, and a social lubricant all in one. Newcomers to the drink sometimes experience the Airag flush, a sudden reddening of the face and a feeling of warmth as their bodies adjust to the potent combination of active cultures and alcohol. It's a sign that your system has just been introduced to something entirely new and powerful. You drain your bowl, feeling that gentle warmth spread through your chest. You've just tasted the true spirit of the steppe. That feeling of warmth spreading through you is more than just the mild effect of alcohol. It's the warmth of acceptance. By sharing that bowl of Airag, you have participated in the most fundamental ritual of Mongol life. This drink is far more than just a clever way to preserve milk. It is the lifeblood of the community, a social and practical staple that underpins their entire culture. You quickly learn that to enter a jeer is to be offered a bowl. It is not a question but a statement of welcome. A wooden bowl, polished smooth from 1,000 hands, is filled and passed to you. The etiquette is precise. You must accept it with your right hand or with both hands, but never with the left hand alone, which is considered unclean. To refuse the offered bowl is to refuse the hospitality, a deep and serious insult that could turn a friend into an enemy. It is the social contract, served in a cup. Practically, Airag serves as a primary source of hydration. On the vast arid steppe, clean water sources can be few and far between. A stagnant pool might harbor dangerous bacteria, but Airag is safe. The fermentation process and the slight alcohol content kill off harmful microbes, making it a much more reliable way to quench your thirst. During the hot summer months, a herder might drink several liters of it a day. It's both food and drink, a liquid meal that provides a constant stream of energy, electrolytes, and hydration, allowing a rider to travel long distances without being weighed down by heavy water skins or solid food. It's the original sports drink, perfectly formulated by the environment itself for the people who lived within it. You notice that the quality of the Airag can vary. The batch you're drinking now, made in the height of summer, is considered the best. This is Airag season, when the grasses of the steppe are at their most lush and green. The mares, grazing on this rich pasture, produce milk that is higher in sugar and fat, which in turn leads to a more flavorful and potent fermentation. A seasoned connoisseur, much like a modern wine enthusiast, can tell not only the quality of the season, but sometimes even the specific region the Airag comes from, just by its subtle notes of smoke, leather, and the unique flora of the local pasture. It's a drink with a distinct terroir, a taste of a specific place and time. Anthropologists and historians debate the extent of Airag's intoxicating effects in a historical context. With an alcohol content rarely exceeding that of a light beer, was its role primarily nutritional and social, or did the constant day-long consumption allow the Mongols to maintain a low-level buzz that influenced their famously aggressive and fearless demeanor in battle? It's a difficult question to answer. But what is certain is its role as a social lubricant. Around the central fire, with bowls of Airag being constantly refilled from the communal kokur, stories are told, news is exchanged, and bonds are forged. It fuels laughter and song, eases negotiations, and sanctifies agreements. No important event, be it a birth, a marriage, or the departure for a hunt or a military campaign, would be complete without it. Libations of Airag are offered to the spirits of the sky and the earth, blessing the endeavor and ensuring good fortune. It is a champagne of the steppe, effervescent and celebratory, but one that is drunk not from delicate flutes but from humble wooden bowls every single day. You look around the warm, circular space of the jar. The rhythmic churning of the paddle in the corner is a constant soothing presence. The passing of the bowl from person to person is a silent, seamless dance of community. You understand now that the Mongol food system isn't just about survival of the individual. Borts and Aaruul are the foods of the journey, the fuel for the lone rider crossing the empty plains. But Airag is the food of the destination, the brew that transforms a collection of individuals into a cohesive, powerful whole. It is what they drink when they are together. Your own bowl is empty again. Before you can even set it down, it is taken and refilled. You nod your thanks, lift the bowl with both hands, and drink. You're no longer just an observer. You've now tasted the three pillars of the Mongol diet: the preserved meat of Borts, the stony milk curds of Aaruul, and the living, fizzing Airag. It's a remarkably complete and efficient system, a culinary trinity derived entirely from the herd. But as you spend more time on the move, you begin to notice a certain monotony. The flavors are intense but limited, savory, sour, and salty. While this diet can sustain a warrior for months, it lacks the freshness, the subtle bitterness, and the occasional sweetness that makes eating a pleasure as well as a necessity. More importantly, it lacks certain micronutrients found in plants. And so, you learn to open your eyes. You learn to see the steppe not as a uniform, endless sea of grass, but as a subtle, complex garden. You learn to forage on the hoof. This isn't a leisurely stroll through the woods with a wicker basket. Foraging here is a fluid, opportunistic part of the daily ride. Your eyes, accustomed to scanning the vast horizon for enemies or game, are now trained to look down, to notice the small details at your horse's feet. You learn to recognize the feathery leaves of a particular plant that signals a starchy, edible root just below the surface. You might not even stop the column. You simply swing down from your saddle, use the tip of your knife to quickly dig up the prize, stuff it into a pouch, and swing back onto your horse as it continues its steady walk. It's a seamless act, blending travel and gathering into a single efficient motion. The steppe, which once seemed so empty, begins to reveal its secrets. You discover the stubborn generosity of roots and tubers. Tucked away in the dense sod are things like wild steppe turnips or the long, sweet roots of wild licorice. They don't look like much on the surface, just a spray of unassuming leaves, but beneath the ground lies a dense package of carbohydrates. At the evening camp, these can be washed and roasted directly in the hot embers of the Aaruul fire, their skins charring and their insides becoming soft and sweet. Or they can be chopped and thrown into the communal stew, adding body and a welcome earthy flavor to the Borts broth. In the more mountainous or forested parts of the steppe, you might be lucky enough to find stands of Siberian pine. The cones are harvested and broken apart to release the small fatty pine nuts inside. These are a treasure, a burst of rich buttery flavor that can be eaten raw or lightly toasted. They are a perfect high-energy snack, easily carried in a small pouch. It's a body of knowledge passed down from mother to daughter, from father to son. You learn that the bright red berries of the sea buckthorn, while too tart to eat in quantity, make a vitamin C-rich juice when crushed. You learn to spot the broad, sturdy stalks of wild rhubarb growing in a damp hollow, a plant that would eventually be introduced to Europe via the Mongol protected Silk Road, where it became a sensation. Ethnobotanists still debate the extent to which Mongols deliberately managed or cultivated patches of useful wild plants. Were they purely opportunistic foragers? Or did they practice a form of proto-agriculture, such as reseeding areas with desirable plants to ensure a supply on their return migration routes? The evidence is sparse, but your own experience tells you that these people leave nothing to chance. You learn to recognize the leaves of wild sorrel, whose sharp, lemony taste can cut through the richness of a fatty piece of mutton. You learn which mushrooms are safe to eat after a rain, and more importantly, which ones will send you on a very different kind of journey. This is a high-stakes education. There are no field guides out here, only the stories and warnings of your elders. The landscape has become a living pantry, offering up small but vital additions to your diet, adding color, texture, and nutrition to the dominant flavors of meat and milk. And among all these hidden treasures, there is one family of plants that is sought above all others for its pungent, powerful flavor. The family of plants you learn to search for above all others is not known for its sweetness or its bulk, but for its bite. It is the allium family, the wild ancestors of the onions, garlic, leeks, and chives that are now staples in kitchens across the globe. For the Mongols, these pungent bulbs and stems were not just an ingredient, they were a culinary revelation. They were the key to transforming the monotonous, if nourishing fare of Borts and broth into a genuinely savory and satisfying meal. You learn to hunt for them with all your senses. Sometimes, you smell them before you see them. A passing shower can release their scent from the soil, or the iron-shod hooves of the horses can crush a patch of wild chives, sending a sharp, familiar, and mouth-watering aroma up into the air. You're riding through a river valley where the ground is a bit softer and damper. Your mentor points, not with his finger, but with a subtle tilt of his chin. You follow his gaze and see it. A dense green patch of thin, spiky leaves that look like overgrown grass. This is a field of wild chives. You dismount, pulling your knife from its sheath. The soil is soft, and you dig around the base of a clump of stems, loosening the earth until you can pull the entire plant free. Clinging to the roots are dozens of tiny pearl-like bulbs, no bigger than your little fingernail. You brush the dirt off and pop one into your mouth. The initial taste is mildly sweet, followed by a powerful, pungent, oniony kick that floods your senses. It's a burst of pure, concentrated flavor. This is a treasure. You and your companions gather bundles of the plants, tying them together with a blade of tough grass. These alliums were a native, and therefore reliable, resource. Archaeobotanists still debate the specific species of wild alliums most commonly used by the Mongols. While historical texts mention onions and garlic, the Central Asian steppe, the Mongol heartland, is home to dozens upon dozens of varieties, and identifying which ones were the true dietary staples remains a complex puzzle. But for you, the distinctions are practical. You learn which ones have flat, blade-like leaves, a sign of wild garlic, whose flavor is sharper and more fiery. You learn which ones hide a larger single bulb that must be dug for with more care. All of them are welcomed. They provide not just flavor, but also crucial nutrients like vitamin C and other compounds that were believed to cleanse the blood and ward off sickness. In a world without medicine, food was often the first line of defense. That evening, you see their transformative power. A simple broth is simmering over the fire, made from a few chunks of Borts. On its own, it's a nourishing but bland soup. But then, you take the wild chives you gathered, slice them finely with your knife, stems, leaves, bulbs and all, and add them to the pot. The effect is immediate and dramatic. A fragrant steam rises from the pot, no longer just smelling of meat, but of something closer to a real kitchen. The sharp, raw flavor of the chives mellows in the heat, becoming sweeter and more aromatic, infusing the entire stew with a deep, savory foundation. It's the difference between merely fueling your body and actually enjoying a meal. It's a small thing, a handful of wild greens, but it feels like a luxury. It's a touch of civilization in the middle of the wilderness. This skill becomes a point of quiet pride. A warrior's prowess isn't just measured in his archery or horsemanship, but in his ability to provide for himself and his companions. Having a fresh bunch of wild garlic tied to your saddle, or a few dried bulbs in your pouch, was a subtle sign of a capable and observant traveler. It showed you were in tune with the rhythms of the land, not just a passenger crossing it. While Borts and Aaruul could last for months, these fresh alliums were a taste of the present moment, a fleeting but powerful reminder that the steppe, for all its harshness, provided for those who knew where to look. But foraging, even for the most flavorful onions, only supplements the diet. For a true resupply, for a feast of fresh meat, you need more than a sharp eye for plants. You need to join the hunt. Foraging provides flavor and variety, a welcome but small-scale addition to your rations. But an army, a nation on the move, requires a more substantial resupply. When the stores of Borts run low and the herds need to be preserved for milk and transport, you turn to the vast living larder of the wilderness itself. You join the hunt. But this is not the quiet, solitary stalking you might imagine. Mongol hunting, in its grandest form, was a military operation. It was a mass mobilization, a thundering display of coordination and discipline known as the Nurge. It was both a food drive and a dress rehearsal for war. The command is given. You ride out, with not just your small company but with thousands of other warriors. You form a line, a great human chain of horsemen that can stretch for 50, 60, even 100 miles across the plains. You are a single tiny link in this chain. To your left and right, you can see the next riders, just specks in the distance. The signal is given, a horn blast, a raised standard, and the entire line begins to move forward at a steady walking pace. The goal is not to chase, but to drive. You and your fellow riders begin to make noise, shouting, beating on your saddles, creating a moving wall of sound that flushes every living creature from its hiding place. Herds of gazelle, solitary deer, lurking wolves, wild boar, even smaller animals like foxes and rabbits, all are forced to move forward, away from the relentless, advancing line. Days turn into a week, and the line continues its slow, inexorable advance. The discipline is absolute. It is a capital offense to allow an animal to break back through the line. You must hold your position, guiding the growing tide of wildlife ever forward. Military historians still debate whether the Nurge was primarily designed as a food-gathering exercise that happened to provide excellent military training, or if it was fundamentally a military maneuver, whose primary purpose was training, with the stockpiling of meat being a convenient byproduct. As you ride, you understand it as both. You are learning to communicate with the riders next to you using hand signals, to maintain formation over vast and varied terrain, to be patient and disciplined. It is the ultimate team-building exercise, with the highest possible stakes. Slowly, the great circle begins to close. The commanders on the flanks of the line guide their forces inward, like the closing jaws of a trap. The territory being driven shrinks from 100 miles wide to 50, then 20, then 5. You can now clearly see the riders on the other side of the encirclement. The air is thick with dust and the noise of thousands of terrified animals, a chaotic churning sea of fur and horn trapped within the tightening ring of horsemen. The final circle is drawn, and the hunt is paused. No one is yet permitted to loose an arrow. According to Mongol tradition, described in texts like The Secret History of the Mongols, the Great Khan himself, or the commander of the hunt, must be the first to make a kill. He rides into the chaotic arena and selects his target, dispatching it with a single expert arrow shot. That single shot is the signal. A great roar goes up from the circle of warriors, and the slaughter begins. It is a controlled chaos, a frenzy of arrows and spears, but even here there are rules. Young warriors are given a chance to prove their mettle. Specific animals are targeted to ensure a maximum yield of meat and pelts. It is an overwhelming, brutal, yet highly efficient process. In a few hours, a vast quantity of fresh meat has been secured, enough to feed the army for weeks. The animals are butchered on the spot. The choicest cuts are reserved for the commanders, but every warrior gets a share. Much of the meat will be eaten fresh in a great feast, a welcome relief from dried rations. The rest will be cut into strips and hung to dry on racks, beginning the process of becoming Borts, replenishing the stores for the journey ahead. You stand over your kill bloodied and exhausted, but you have a profound understanding of the Mongol way of war. You have just participated in their most devastating tactic, the encirclement. You have learned how to turn a vast open space into a killing ground. And you have learned that for the Mongols, there is no difference between hunting for food and preparing for battle. The thunderous Nurge is an event, a spectacle of strategy and might that fills your stores for a season. But it is not how you eat day to day. The reality of life on the march is more opportunistic, a series of small, quiet hunts that supplement the evening pot. As you ride, your bow is always ready, not just for enemies, but for a meal. Your eyes are constantly scanning the terrain, not for armies, but for the flicker of a rabbit's ears or the plump silhouette of a marmot sunning itself on a rock. It is this last creature, the steppe marmot, that is one of the most common and vital sources of fresh meat. You see one now, a stout furry creature sitting upright near the entrance to its burrow. With a practiced, fluid motion, you knock a special arrow, one with a blunt wooden head designed to stun or kill without piercing the valuable pelt, and let it fly. The arrow finds its mark. Tonight you will have fresh meat. You now learn one of the most distinctive and, to an outsider, startling methods of Mongol cooking. It's a technique born of pure efficiency, a way to cook an animal with minimal equipment and maximum use of its own body. It's called budog. You take the marmot. The first step is to break the leg bones beneath the skin, making the carcass pliable. Then, a small incision is made in the neck. Through this single opening, you perform a kind of reverse butchery. With skillful hands, you reach inside and carefully remove the organs and skeleton, leaving the entire skin, with the meat and fat still attached to its interior, as an intact, fleshy bag. It's a strange, slightly gruesome process, but you are left with a perfect sealed cooking vessel made of the animal itself. While this is happening, your companion has been placing smooth, fist-sized river stones into the heart of your dung fire. You wait until they are intensely hot, glowing faintly in the embers. These stones are your oven. The empty skin bag of the marmot is now ready to be filled. You might stuff a handful of the wild onions you gathered earlier inside, along with some salt if you have it. Then, using a pair of sticks as tongs, you quickly take the superheated stones from the fire and push them one by one into the marmot bag. Once it's full of hot stones and aromatics, you tie the neck incision tightly shut with a bit of sinew. The marmot is now a swollen, sealed pouch, cooking rapidly from the inside out. You might use a simple blowtorch, a reed filled with fat, to singe the fur from the outside of the skin, cooking it from both directions at once. The skin becomes taut and greasy as the fat melts inside, and you can hear a faint sizzling sound. This method is incredibly efficient. It wastes no heat, requires no pot, and the sealed skin keeps all the moisture and flavor locked inside, steaming the meat in its own juices until it is impossibly tender. However, this particular meal comes with a historical footnote of profound significance. Steppe marmots can be carriers of the bacterium Yersinia pestis, the agent of the bubonic plague. Historians and public health experts still debate the level of awareness Mongols had about this. They were known to avoid hunting marmots that seemed sluggish or sick, a practice that suggests a generational knowledge of the danger. But it is this very connection, the intimate contact with infected rodent populations, that has led many to theorize that the Mongol Empire's trade routes were the primary vectors for the spread of the Black Death into Europe in the 14th century. After about an hour, the budog is ready. The skin is slit open, releasing a cloud of fragrant, meaty steam. The hot stones are carefully removed. These greasy, scorching hot stones are not discarded. They are passed from hand to hand. The heat and the coating of rich marmot fat are believed to be therapeutic, soothing tired muscles and relieving fatigue. Finally, the feast. The meat, having been steamed from within, is succulent and falls away from the skin. It has a strong, gamey flavor, enriched by the wild onions and the smoky essence from the hot rocks. It is a rich, oily meal, packed with the calories needed to survive the cold steppe nights. You have turned a humble rodent into a hot, hearty meal, using nothing but fire, stones, and the animal's own body. It's a testament to a brutal, practical, and deeply resourceful way of life. You've just shared a meal cooked inside the animal itself, a marvel of potless cuisine. But while the budog method is ingenious, it's not practical for every situation. You can't exactly make a soup in a marmot. For the daily, life-sustaining tasks of boiling Borts and brewing tea, you need tools. And when your entire world has to fit in a few bags slung over a horse, every single object must be essential, multifunctional, and durable. You now learn to pack your saddlebag pantry, a masterclass in minimalist survival. There is no room for sentimentality, no space for a single useless gadget. If you can't use it to eat, stay warm, or fight, you don't bring it. The first and most vital piece of equipment has nothing to do with food itself, but with the energy needed to transform it. Fire. You have a small, worn leather pouch. Inside are 3 precious items: a piece of flint, a hard gray stone with a sharp edge, a small C-shaped piece of high-carbon steel, and a bundle of tinder, which could be anything from the fluffy down of a cattail to a piece of charred, punk-like fungus that can catch and hold a spark. With these 3 things, you can create fire anywhere, in any weather. The ability to strike a spark onto tinder and breathe it into flame is the foundational skill of steppe life. A fire means a hot meal, a shield against the crushing cold of the night, and a defense against predators. It is life itself, tucked into a tiny bag. Next is your knife. It's not a fancy jewel-hilted dagger, but a simple utilitarian tool with a sturdy blade and a handle of bone or wood. This knife is an extension of your hand. It is your butcher shop for skinning game, your kitchen utensil for slicing Borts and wild onions, your workshop for mending a leather strap or carving a new tent peg, and if all else fails, your last line of defense in a fight. You keep it sharp with a small smooth whetstone you found in a riverbed. Another essential part of your kit. A dull knife is a liability you cannot afford. For cooking, you have a pot. Archaeologists and historians still debate the prevalence of metal versus leather cookware among common Mongol warriors. A chieftain might have a fine bronze cauldron carried on a pack animal, but your own pot is more modest. It's a small, battered iron vessel, blackened by 1,000 fires, just big enough to make a stew for 2 or 3 men. It is your most direct connection to a hot meal. And for eating that meal, you have your most personal possession, your bowl. It's carved from a beautiful piece of hardwood burl, the swirling grain polished smooth by years of use and the oils from countless meals. It fits perfectly in the cup of your hands. Archaeological finds in Mongol-era graves frequently unearth these personal items, a warrior buried with their favorite bowl, their knife, their flint, and steel, confirming how integral these objects were to an individual's identity. You don't share your bowl. It is yours alone. Tucked into your boot or sash, is a simple wooden spoon or a pair of chopsticks for eating from it. Finally, you have the containers for your rations. Your powdered Borts is kept in a cleaned and dried sheep's bladder. It's surprisingly tough, waterproof, and weighs almost nothing. Your Aaruul is in a simple leather drawstring pouch, and for liquids you might carry a hollowed-out gourd or another leather flask. Some riders carry one more quirky, specialized tool, a drinking straw. A hollow reed or the thin, hollow bone from a bird's leg allows you to drink the thin, potent Airag from the bottom of the communal kohur, getting past the thick foam that often gathers on top. It's a tiny, elegant solution to a common problem. You look at the complete kit, laid out on a blanket: a knife, a pot, a bowl, a spark, and a few pouches of dried food. It seems like so little, yet it is everything you need to cross a continent. It is the distilled essence of survival. You have your rations, your tools, and your fire. Your saddlebag is a model of efficiency. Yet all of it is useless without the single most important resource, the one substance you cannot preserve, cannot carry in large quantities, and cannot survive without for more than a few days: water. On the arid plains and in the Gobi Desert, which the Mongol armies had to cross, the search for water is the overriding daily obsession. It dictates your route, your speed, and your chances of survival. A warrior's skill is measured not just by his aim with a bow, but by his ability to read the land for signs of this hidden lifeblood. You learn that the steppe is not as dry as it first appears if you know how to look. You train your eyes to see the subtle clues. A patch of unusually green grass in an otherwise parched landscape hints at a spring or subsurface moisture. You learn that a line of willows or poplars, the only trees for 100 miles, is a living map that traces the path of an underground river. The flight of birds in the evening converging on a single point can lead you to a hidden water hole. The tracks of other animals, from gazelle to wolves, can form a trail that ends at the one thing all creatures need. Hydrologists and historians still debate the methods Mongols might have used to find deep groundwater. Were their skills limited to reading surface-level signs and digging shallow wells, or did they possess a more sophisticated, almost intuitive understanding of underground geology that allowed them to locate more permanent sources? Sometimes the water is not on the surface. You find a dry riverbed, the sand and stone baked by the sun. It seems lifeless, but you know that water, being heavy, always seeks the lowest point. You begin to dig. At the outer bend of the old river channel, you scoop away the dry, loose sand. The first foot is dust. The second is cool to the touch. The third is damp. You keep digging, and slowly, miraculously, water begins to seep into the bottom of your hole. It's muddy at first, but as you scoop it out, it becomes clearer. You have created a nomad's well, a seep. You have summoned water from the bones of the earth. Once found, water is never trusted. A clear-looking pool could be stagnant and teeming with invisible dangers. Every drop of water from an unknown source must be purified, and the most reliable way is to boil it. Your small iron pot and your flint and steel are now not just for cooking, but are tools of preventative medicine. You heat the water until it comes to a rolling boil, a simple act that kills the microscopic organisms that could otherwise cripple you with sickness. This discipline is non-negotiable. The success of the Great Mongol Communication Network, the Yam relay system, depended on this knowledge. Each station, spaced a day's ride apart, was meticulously placed near a reliable source of water, allowing messengers to cross the vast empire at incredible speed. Conservation is the final crucial skill. You are taught to drink with discipline. You don't gulp down water greedily when you're hot and thirsty. You take small measured sips. You learn to get much of your hydration from your food and drink, the thin broth from your Borts, and especially the ever-present Airag, which has the dual benefit of being both hydrating and purified by its own fermentation. In the most extreme and desperate circumstances, a warrior might turn to his horse for a final grim offering. The liquid from the partially digested vegetation in a freshly killed horse's stomach could be wrung out through a cloth, providing a foul-tasting but life-saving drink. It's a brutal reality that underscores the absolute primacy of water. Without it, all the food, all the weapons, all the ambition of an empire would turn to dust and blow away on the wind. But there is another, less fatal way your horse can save you when all other sustenance is gone. Your horse has carried you, provided the milk that sustains you, and even led you to water. Now, in the most dire of circumstances, it offers one final, life-giving resource, a sacrifice made without death. You are days out from your camp, perhaps on a scouting mission deep in enemy territory. Your pouch of Borts is empty. The landscape is barren, offering no game, no edible roots. A gnawing, debilitating hunger has set in, and your strength is failing. To stop is to die. To turn back is to fail. You must find the energy to continue, and so you turn to your silent, loyal partner. You must perform a venesection. This is not an act of cruelty, but a desperate and skillful procedure, a pact of survival between man and beast. You approach your horse, calming it with your voice and a steady hand. You are not its enemy. You are its companion, and you are asking for a portion of its life force so that you may both survive. You run your hand along its powerful neck, feeling for the steady pulse of the jugular vein. With the tip of your razor-sharp knife, you make a small, precise incision. Not a deep slashing cut, but a quick, shallow nick, just enough to open the vein. This is a skill that takes immense practice to master. A slip of the hand could permanently injure your mount, your most valuable possession. Warm, dark blood begins to well up and flow from the small opening. You quickly bring your wooden bowl to the stream, collecting the liquid. You do not take much. A pint, perhaps a little more. You know that taking too much will weaken the horse, making it unable to carry you. The goal is sustenance, not exsanguination. Historians and equine veterinarians still debate how frequently this practice was employed. Was it a common, almost routine supplement for scouts, as some dramatic accounts suggest? Or was it an exceedingly rare, last-ditch survival tactic? Standing here, with your stomach aching from emptiness, it feels only like a grim necessity. Once you have what you need, you press your thumb firmly against the wound. The flow of blood slows, then stops. You might smear a bit of clay or a plaster of horse dung and hair over the cut to help it seal and keep flies away. You stroke the horse's neck, murmuring to it, acknowledging its sacrifice. Then you turn to the bowl in your hands. It is warm, almost hot, and full of a dark, crimson liquid. This is the most direct and potent form of nourishment imaginable. You raise the bowl to your lips and drink. The taste is challenging, salty, coppery, with a metallic tang that coats your tongue. But you are not drinking for flavor. You are drinking for life. The blood is rich in protein and iron, a natural protein shot that your body can absorb almost instantly. You can feel a wave of warmth and energy spread through your limbs, chasing away the faintness of hunger. It is a primal and immediate transfer of strength. This practice, while shocking to outsiders, was not unique to the Mongols. Other nomadic pastoralists, like the Maasai people of East Africa, have long traditions of bleeding their cattle for food, mixing the blood with milk. It is a common solution developed by different cultures facing the same problem: how to get nourishment from your herd without diminishing its numbers. If you had the time and the ability to make a small fire, you might cook the blood. Poured into your pot and gently heated, it would coagulate, turning into a thick, dark scramble, similar to the filling of a blood sausage. This makes it easier for some to digest and the flavor less intense. But out here, on the move, with enemies potentially near, there is no time for such niceties. You drink it raw and warm. You have taken a part of your horse's life into yourself, and for now it is enough to keep you riding. The drinking of blood was a desperate act, a way to get lean, life-saving protein when your body was on the verge of shutting down. But it is not the fuel of endurance. For the long, grinding reality of a winter campaign or a journey across a frozen landscape, your body craves a different, more potent kind of energy. It craves fat. In the brutal cold of the steppe, fat is not a dietary evil to be avoided. It is the most precious fuel you can consume, the slow-burning log that keeps your internal furnace from going out. It provides more than twice the calories of protein by weight, and your body knows this instinctively. A high-fat diet is not a choice here. It is a prerequisite for survival. The primary source for this vital resource comes from a unique and remarkable animal, the fat-tailed sheep. This breed, common across Central Asia, is a masterpiece of natural adaptation. It stores enormous reserves of fat not throughout its body, but in a large fleshy deposit on its rump and tail. This tail can weigh dozens of pounds and is a walking block of pure energy. When a sheep is slaughtered, this fatty appendage is prized above all else. But raw fat, like fresh meat, is perishable. To make it last, you must render it. You watch as the great, wobbly tail, along with the hard, white sweet from around the animal's kidneys, is cut into small chunks and placed in a large iron cauldron over a low, steady fire. At first, the only sound is the gentle crackle of the flames. Then, as the pot heats, a soft sizzling begins. The opaque white chunks of fat slowly begin to melt and clarify, turning into a shimmering golden liquid. The savory, rich smell of cooking fat, a smell your body recognizes on a deep primal level as pure energy, fills the air. Small pieces of connective tissue, now freed from the melted fat, shrink and brown, crisping up into what you might call cracklings. These are skimmed off the top, sprinkled with a little precious salt, and eaten immediately. They are a delicious, crunchy, and intensely savory treat for those doing the work. Once all the fat has liquefied, the pot is taken off the fire. The golden liquid, the tallow, is carefully ladled out and strained through a piece of coarse cloth to remove any remaining solids. This purified liquid fat is then poured into a cleaned and prepared animal stomach or bladder. As the hours pass and the temperature drops, the liquid slowly cools and solidifies, turning into a firm, creamy white block of pure, shelf-stable fat. This is your portable power station. A single sheep can yield a large bladder full of tallow that will last for months without spoiling. Nutritional historians still debate the potential health impacts of such a high-fat diet. Was the Mongols' incredibly active lifestyle sufficient to offset the modern risks associated with high saturated fat consumption? Or did they possess unique genetic adaptations that allowed them to process these fats more efficiently? The uses for this rendered tallow are endless. A large spoonful can be added to the evening stew of Borts and water, instantly transforming a thin, watery broth into a rich, calorie-dense, and deeply satisfying meal. On a freezing morning, a small piece might be eaten on its own, a quick injection of energy to start the day. It could be used as a cooking medium to fry a piece of fresh meat, or spread on a rare piece of flatbread acquired through trade. But its genius lies in its versatility beyond the cooking pot. This same tallow can be used to grease and waterproof your leather boots, protecting your feet from frostbite. A wick placed in a small bowl of it creates a simple lamp, a source of light in the deep darkness of the gear. It can be mixed with herbs to create a healing salve for chapped skin or wounds. It is your fuel, your butter, your waterproofing, your light source, and your first aid kit, all rendered from the tail of a single sheep. You remember the taste of the crispy cracklings made even more delicious by a sprinkling of precious salt. You now begin to understand just how precious it truly was. In your world, salt is a common, almost trivial substance, a shaker on every table. Out here, on the endless steppe, it is white gold. It is a strategic resource, a form of wealth, and a biological necessity that governs the movement of both men and animals. You can live for weeks without meat, but without salt, your body will eventually fail. The constant riding, the summer heat, the strenuous work, all of it makes you sweat, and with every drop of sweat you lose this vital mineral. Without it, your muscles would cramp, your mind would grow foggy, and your strength would collapse. Your own survival and the health of your herds depends on finding it. You learn that your animals, especially the horses and sheep, have an instinct for it. They will travel for miles to find a natural salt lick, a place where saline earth is exposed. A good herder knows the location of every salt lick in his territory, and this knowledge is as valuable as a map of water sources. You see these places for yourself, a patch of barren ground, licked smooth and hollowed out by the tongues of countless animals over centuries. Sometimes, in the absence of pure salt, you see herders gather this salt earth. They pack the dirt into bags, and back at camp, they will mix it with water in a pot. After the dirt settles to the bottom, the clear, salty water on top is carefully poured off and used in cooking. It's a gritty, inefficient process, but it provides what the body needs. The best sources are the great salt pans. the beds of ancient lakes that have long since evaporated under the relentless sun, leaving behind a vast, shimmering crust of pure white salt. To see one for the first time is a breathtaking experience. It looks like a frozen lake, a field of snow stretching to the horizon, crunching under your boots. Here the salt is harvested in great heavy blocks, which are then broken down and packed into leather bags for transport. Control of one of these major salt pans meant control of a great source of wealth and power. Economic historians still debate the extent to which the Mongol Empire's military campaigns were influenced by a salt strategy, deliberate movements to capture and control the major salt-producing regions of Central Asia. Salt's most obvious use is to make food palatable. A pinch of salt transforms a bland meat broth or a sour milk curd into something genuinely flavorful, but its role in preservation is just as important. Remember the Borts? While the dry steppe wind is the primary preservative, rubbing the strips of meat with salt before hanging them to dry would draw out even more moisture, creating a harder, more durable jerky that was even more resistant to spoilage. For a warrior on a long campaign, this added security was invaluable. Because it was essential for life and not available everywhere, salt became a primary medium of exchange. A block of salt had a recognized value and could be traded for horses, hides, grain, or tools. This connection between salt and payment is ancient and deep. The very word salary comes from the Latin salarium, which was the money given to Roman soldiers to buy salt, or sal. The Mongol warrior, trading a bag of salt for a new arrowhead, is part of a story that is thousands of years old. You learn to use it sparingly, to treat each crystal not as a mere seasoning, but as a tiny piece of treasure, a speck of concentrated wealth harvested from the bones of the earth. You would never dream of complaining that your stew was too salty. You would be grateful it was salty at all. And this valuable commodity was often traded for another dried, compressed, and utterly essential item, one that was not a food, but a drink that shaped the culture of the entire continent. The item you often trade your precious salt for does not grow on the steppe. It is a child of the warm, misty mountains far to the south, a product of a settled, agricultural world that is in every way the opposite of your own. It is tea. But this is not the delicate, loose-leaf tea you might imagine. For the long, brutal journey across a continent, tea was transformed into a substance as rugged and durable as the nomads who craved it. It was compressed into bricks. You watch as a trader Un slings a heavy, rectangular block from his pack. It's dark, almost black and hard as slate. This is a tea brick. To make it, the crudest tea leaves, stems, and even twigs are picked, withered, steamed, and then compressed under immense pressure into a mold. The resulting brick is easy to transport, resistant to the elements, and can last for years. These bricks were a cornerstone of a vast trade network known as the Tea Horse Road, a series of treacherous caravan paths that connected the tea-growing regions of China with the grasslands of the steppe and the high plateau of Tibet. The Chinese wanted the powerful, sturdy horses of the nomads for their armies. The nomads, in turn, craved the tea. The bricks themselves became a form of currency. A whole brick could buy a sheep. A small chunk broken off the corner could pay for a minor service. Its value was understood everywhere. Historians still debate whether this trade was driven purely by Mongol demand, or if it was also a calculated political tool used by Chinese dynasties to pacify their nomadic neighbors by creating a dependency on a product only they could supply. To prepare the tea, you use the tip of your knife to pry a small chunk, maybe the size of your thumb, from the corner of a brick. It takes effort. The material is dense and woody. You drop this chunk into your pot of boiling water. You don't just steep it for a few minutes. You boil it, rolling it in the churning water for a good long while, extracting every last bit of color and flavor from the coarse leaves and stems. The water turns a deep, reddish black, and a strong, earthy aroma fills the air. A modern tea purist would be horrified by this treatment of the leaf, but you are not trying to coax out subtle, delicate notes. You are making fuel. And then comes the part that truly defines Mongol tea, transforming it from a simple beverage into a nourishing, liquid meal. First, you add a generous pinch of salt. The salty taste helps quench thirst and replenishes the electrolytes lost during a long day's ride. Next, you pour in a splash of milk, perhaps fresh from a goat or reconstituted by dissolving some Aaruul in the hot liquid. Finally, you take a substantial dollop of the rendered sheeptail fat, the tallow, and drop it into the pot. You then use a small whisk or a wooden paddle to churn the mixture vigorously, emulsifying the fat into the tea until it becomes a thick, creamy, and opaque brew. You are handed a bowl of this soothes, or milky tea. It's steaming, the surface shimmering with tiny droplets of fat. The taste is unlike any tea you've ever had. It is savory, not sweet. It is rich, thick, and salty, with the earthy bitterness of the tea balanced by the creamy smoothness of the milk and fat. It is incredibly warming and fortifying. It is a soup, a meal in a bowl. This drink served multiple purposes. The caffeine was a welcome stimulant, keeping you alert in the saddle. The hot liquid helped your body digest the immense quantities of meat and fat that made up your diet. And most importantly, the combination of fat, milk, and salt provided a huge and immediate boost of calories, rehydrating you and warming you from the inside out. It is the perfect beverage for a cold, windy, and unforgiving world. The savory, buttery tea is a product of trade, a taste of a foreign land. But it wasn't the only foreign foodstuff to find its way into your saddlebag. From the same settled agricultural civilizations to the south came another class of food, one that was fundamentally alien to the pastoral way of life. Grain. You live your life following the grass, but these are the seeds of a different kind of grass, one that has been tamed, cultivated, and harvested by people who stay in one place. For you, grain is not a staple. It is a luxury, a welcome but rare departure from the relentless diet of meat and milk. Having a small, heavy sack of grain tied to your pack horse is a sign of status. It means you are wealthy enough to have traded for it, or powerful enough to have taken it as tribute from a conquered farming village. For the average herder, grain was an occasional treat. For the Mongol armies, however, especially after the empire began to expand, it became a more common and strategic resource. The imperial capital, Karakorum, was a hub for tribute, and archaeologists there have found large storage pits for grain, proof of a centralized system to feed the growing imperial machine. Historians still debate how much this influx of grain truly altered the diet of the common soldier. Was it a fundamental shift, or did the core meat and dairy diet remain supreme, with grain as a mere supplement? The most common grain you encounter is millet. It's a perfect grain for a nomadic lifestyle. The seeds are tiny, bead-like, and hardy. They cook quickly and don't require vast amounts of water, making them far more practical than rice. You watch as a meal is prepared. A handful of the tiny yellow millet grains are thrown into a dry, hot pot. They are tossed for a minute or two, toasting them lightly, which releases a pleasant, nutty aroma. Then, a ladle full of water is added, and the pot is left to simmer over the fire. In about 20 minutes, the hard little beads have absorbed the water and softened, swelling into a thick, fluffy porridge. This porridge is a canvas. It can be eaten plain, a simple, starchy comfort food that is a profound relief after weeks of nothing but intense, savory flavors. It can be made richer by cooking it with milk instead of water. A spoonful of tallow or a few crumbles of Aaruul can be stirred in to make it more substantial, or it can be used as a way to stretch a meat ration. A few pieces of Borts can be rehydrated in the same pot, the millet thickening the broth and adding bulk, turning a small amount of meat into a much more filling meal for several people. On rare occasions, you might encounter flour, usually made from barley or wheat. With this, a true luxury can be made. Bread. It's a simple, unleavened flatbread, just flour and water mixed into a stiff dough. The flat discs of dough are then cooked on a large, flat stone that has been heated in the fire, or sometimes even on the clean surface of a metal shield held over the embers. The bread puffs up, charring slightly on the outside, its inside soft and steamy. To eat a piece of this fresh, warm bread, perhaps dipped in a fatty stew, is an experience of profound satisfaction. In lands like Tibet, you might also encounter tsampa, roasted barley flour. This ingenious food requires no cooking at all. You simply take a scoop of the flour in your bowl, add a splash of hot butter tea, and knead it with your fingers into a thick, doughy paste. It's an instant, high-energy meal, a perfect traveler's food that the Mongols quickly appreciated and adopted. You realize that for you, carbohydrates are the exotic treat. The simple earthy taste of grain is a welcome island in the vast, rich, and roiling sea of your normal diet. You have now seen all the individual components of the Mongol pantry. The dried meat, the milkstones, the foraged roots, the pungent onions, the precious grains, the rendered fat, the salt, and the tea. Each is a marvel of preservation and portability. But a cuisine is more than just a list of ingredients. It is in how they are brought together. In the Mongol world, the meeting place for all these disparate elements is the communal cooking pot. As the sun sets and the vast cold darkness of the steppe night descends, a fire is lit, and a single large cauldron is placed over the flames. This pot is the heart of the camp. There are no separate courses here, no complex recipes. There is only the shoal, the one-pot stew, and its genius lies in its simplicity and its collaborative nature. The process is like a nightly ritual. It begins with water, the most basic element. Once it's boiling, the contributions begin. You, remembering your successful foraging trip, pull out a handful of wild chives and slice them into the pot, their sharp scent blooming in the steam. A warrior next to you opens his leather pouch and adds a scoop of powdered Borts. Another, who had luck with his bow, adds chunks of fresh rabbit meat. Someone else contributes a small handful of millet, a luxury that will thicken the broth and make the meal more substantial. A chunk of tallow is dropped in, melting into shimmering golden pools that add richness and calories. Finally, a few pieces of Aaruul might be crumbled in, their sourness dissolving to add a bright, tangy note that cuts through the fat. It is, in essence, the original stone soup. Everyone gives what they have, and the result is a meal far greater than the sum of its parts. The stew is different every night, a unique reflection of the day's fortunes. Sometimes it is thin and simple, other times it is thick and rich with fresh game. Sociologists and military historians debate the primary function of the communal pot. Was it a purely practical matter of logistical efficiency, or was it a deliberately fostered social institution designed to forge the intense group cohesion and loyalty necessary for a warband to function? As you sit in the firelight, you know the answer is both. This way of eating builds a powerful bond. There is no head of the table. Warriors simply gather around the fire, each with his own wooden bowl, and ladle the bubbling stew directly from the pot. Everyone eats the same food, a tangible expression of the Mongol concept of nokur, or comradeship. Papal envoys who traveled to the Mongol Empire in the 13th century, like John of Planocarpini, described this simple but effective way of eating, noting how the warriors would gather to share a single pot of meat and millet. In some camps, a tradition of the eternal broth was even practiced. The pot was never fully emptied and scrubbed clean. A small amount of the day's stew was left behind to become the base for the next day's meal, creating a continuous, ever-evolving broth that carried the flavors of the past into the present like a culinary heirloom. You dip your bowl into the cauldron, the warmth seeping into the wood and into your hands. The stew is a rich tapestry of flavors and textures. The savory rehydrated boars, the tender fresh meat, the pungent notes of wild onion, the soft pop of the millet grains, all swimming in a rich, fatty, and slightly sour broth. It's a deeply comforting and democratic meal. It erases the day's hierarchy. Here by the fire, you are not a commander or a scout. You are simply a man among men, sharing what you have and, in turn, being sustained by the community. It is the food of the wolf pack, the meal that fuels the conquest. You sit by the fire, your belly full of the hearty communal stew, feeling the bonds of comradeship that the shared meal creates. Now, for a moment, shift your perspective. You are no longer a Mongol warrior. You are a soldier in a European army, or a guard on the walls of a Chinese city. Your world is one of fixed points, castles, cities, and farms. Your army is a slow, ponderous machine, tethered to an immense baggage train, a miles-long serpent of creaking carts and wagons filled with grain, barrels of salted fish, and fodder for your large, delicate war horses. This supply line is your life, and it is your greatest weakness. And you have just heard that the Mongols are coming. The fear they inspire is not just of their ferocity in battle, but of their very nature. They move like ghosts. They have no baggage train. They don't march. They flow across the landscape like a flood, a river of horsemen that seems to need nothing but the grass beneath their feet. How can you fight an enemy that doesn't need to be resupplied? How do you defend against an army that can ride for a week, deep into your territory, without ever stopping for food. Their entire way of life has been weaponized. Their food system is a tool of psychological warfare. During the Great Mongol invasion of Hungary in 1241, the heavily armored European knights were baffled and terrified. Their own movements were slow and predictable, dictated by the need for fodder and provisions. The Mongols, by contrast, were a whirlwind. They could ride circles around the lumbering European columns, striking where they were least expected, melting back into the plains before a defense could be mounted. They were, in effect, living off the Hungarian grasslands, the very land the Europeans were trying to defend. Military strategists still debate whether this logistical superiority was a conscious doctrine of living off the land or simply an organic byproduct of their nomadic lifestyle applied to warfare. To the soldier on the ground, the distinction is meaningless. The result is the same, an enemy that seems to operate by a different set of physical laws. Now imagine you are inside a besieged city. Your gates are barred, your walls are manned. You have stockpiles of food, but you know they are finite. Every day you watch your own rations shrink. But when you look over the walls at the Mongol camp, you see no signs of hunger or desperation. You see vast herds of horses grazing contentedly. You see warriors riding out to hunt in your countryside, treating your fields and forests as their own personal larder. They are not waiting for a supply train from a distant homeland. They have brought their entire food production system with them. The siege is no longer a race against their supplies. It's a race against your own. It's a race you are destined to lose. They aren't just besieging your city. They are consuming your entire world while you slowly starve within your stone cage. The stories and rumors about their diet only add to the terror. To the settled farmer who lives on bread and beer, the thought of drinking fermented mare's milk is barbaric. The idea of subsisting on dried meat powder and sour milk curds is unnatural. And the whispers of them drinking the blood from their own horses paints a picture of something utterly inhuman, a horde that is part man, part beast. This reputation, which they did nothing to discourage, was a powerful weapon. It dehumanized them, making them seem like a force of nature, an earthquake or a blizzard for which there was no defense. You begin to understand that the Mongols conquered not just with the bow, but with the saddlebag. Their simple, rugged, and endlessly mobile pantry was one of the most devastating weapons of war the world had ever seen. Your ability to live off the land made you a figure of terror to the settled world. But conquest is followed by rule. The gates of the city are breached, the resistance is broken, and you are no longer on the outside looking in. You are the master now, and you walk through the very storehouses and marketplaces that once seemed like a world away. And you, being a Mongol, are above all else a pragmatist. You are not bound by dogma. If a conquered people has a technique, a tool, or a food that is useful, you will adopt it. Your culinary world is about to expand. You walk through the bustling market of a newly acquired Persian or Chinese city. The air, which on the steppe carried only the scent of grass, dust, and dung smoke, is now a dizzying tapestry of new aromas. You see pyramids of brightly colored powders, the spices that traveled the Silk Road, which you now control. Yellow turmeric, red chili, black pepper, and the fragrant bark of cinnamon. These are flavors you have never known, and you quickly learn that a tiny pinch of this peppery dust can bring a whole new dimension to your familiar boiled mutton. You are introduced to noodles, a food seemingly designed for your way of life. Made from wheat flour and easily dried, they are lightweight, store for a long time, and cook in minutes in a pot of boiling broth, a perfect addition to your mobile pantry. It is in the realm of preservation that you find the most synergy. Your entire food system is based on drying things, meat, milk, to make them last. Now you learn new methods. You watch Chinese cooks preserving vegetables not by drying but by pickling. Cabbages are chopped, salted, and packed into large earthenware jars where they ferment, becoming a sour, crunchy, preserved food that will last through the winter. The sour flavor profile is already familiar and pleasing to your palate, which loves the tang of Aaruul and Airag. You adopt this technique enthusiastically. Now, even in the dead of winter, you can have the crunch and vitamin boost of vegetables. This fusion of taste became a hallmark of the empire. In the Mongol-ruled Ilkhanate of Persia, a new cuisine emerged that blended nomadic taste with Persian traditions, resulting in dishes like savory lamb stews cooked with sweet preserved fruits, like apricots and dates. This period of stability under your rule, the Pax Mongolica, created the largest free trade zone the world had ever seen. It wasn't just silk and spices that moved along the secured routes, but ideas, technologies, and recipes. You may have even played a key role in popularizing distillation. The process of creating potent spirits from wine or fermented grain existed before, but your empire, with its constant demand for portable, high-value goods and its network of mobile artisans, helped spread this technology from east to west. A flask of distilled liquor was far more potent and less perishable than a skin of wine or Airag, making it an ideal ration for a soldier. Culinary historians still debate how deeply these new foods and techniques penetrated Mongol society. Were they largely confined to the elite khans and their cosmopolitan courts in cities like Xanadu and Samarkand, or did practices like pickling filter down to the common herder on the steppe? What is clear is that you were not a passive conqueror. You were an active and curious participant in the cultures you now ruled. You took the spoils of conquest, and instead of just consuming them, you learned their secrets, adapted their methods, and created a new, dynamic, and continent-spanning culinary world. You came to conquer, but you stayed to taste. And this ever-changing diet, from the simple steppe rations to the complex fusion of the imperial courts, required a body that was as tough and adaptable as your spirit. You've learned what the Mongols ate, how they cooked it, and how their food system became a weapon of conquest and an engine of empire. Now you turn your attention inward, to the silent, invisible machinery of the human body. You consider the incredible biological adaptations required to not only survive, but thrive on such an extreme and limited diet. If you, with your modern digestive system, were to suddenly switch to a daily menu of rock-hard dried meat, fermented mare's milk, and rendered sheep fat, the results would be unpleasant. Your gut, accustomed to a steady stream of fiber, complex carbohydrates, and a wide variety of proteins, would likely stage a full-scale rebellion. To understand how a Mongol warrior could handle this, you have to think about the ecosystem within them. Your digestive tract is home to trillions of microorganisms, a complex community known as the gut microbiome. This internal garden is shaped by what you eat, and in turn it shapes how you process food. The gut biome of a Mongol warrior would have been a world away from your own. It would have been a highly specialized environment, dominated by microbial species that were ruthlessly efficient at breaking down animal protein and saturated fat. The bacteria that, in your gut, thrive on digesting kale and whole grains would have found very little to do and would have been crowded out by these fat and protein specialists. Their relationship with dairy is particularly fascinating. Many people of East Asian descent are lactose intolerant as adults, meaning they lack the enzyme to properly digest the sugar in fresh milk. Bioanthropologists still debate the specific genetic markers for lactose tolerance among 13th century Mongol populations. But in a way, it didn't matter. The Mongols weren't drinking fresh milk in large quantities. Their genius was in fermentation. The process of making Aaruul and Airag pre-digests the lactose, breaking it down into more easily digestible lactic acid. Their diet wasn't built on tolerating lactose. It was built on consuming a massive daily dose of probiotics, the living bacteria within the fermented foods. Their gut was a churning, living extension of the fermentation sac, constantly replenished with the very microbes needed to process their food. This probiotic-rich diet would have created an incredibly robust and resilient internal environment, perhaps protecting them from many of the pathogenic bacteria they would have encountered in contaminated water or new environments on their campaigns. But this extreme diet was not without its costs. It's possible that their genetic makeup, honed by millennia of boom and bust cycles on the steppe, favored what is known as a thrifty genotype. This is a hypothesized set of genes that makes the body incredibly efficient at storing fat from every available calorie, a massive advantage when food is scarce. It's the perfect adaptation for a nomadic hunter. The constant physical exertion of their lifestyle would have kept the potential negative effects in check, and their tastes were likely shaped from birth. The concept of flavor imprinting suggests that a baby exposed to the sour, savory, and gamey flavors of the Mongol diet through their mother's milk would grow up finding those flavors normal and comforting. You ponder the sheer resilience of the human body, its ability to adapt to the outer world by cultivating a specific inner world. The Mongol warrior was tough on the outside, but that toughness was mirrored and made possible by an equally specialized and rugged internal ecosystem. It was a body built by, and for, the steppe. A digestive system that could extract every last calorie from the harshest of ingredients, turning the sparse offerings of the grassland into the fuel of a world-spanning empire. The empire of the Great Khans, the largest contiguous land empire in history, has long since crumbled into dust. Its borders have vanished from maps, its great cities have returned to the earth. And yet, its ghost lingers. It haunts our world not in the ruins of forgotten capitals, but in the quiet, everyday act of eating. You can trace the legacy of the Mongol pantry in the foods you eat today, a surprising inheritance of flavor and technique that whispers of the horsemen who once rode out of the steppe. The most direct lineage, of course, is found in modern Mongolia. Here, the foods you have come to know are not historical artifacts. They are a vibrant, living tradition. You can see a herder today cutting beef into long strips to make borts, hanging it to dry in the same wind and sun. You can see a woman on the steps of her ger laying out freshly shaped Aaruul to harden into the familiar milkstones. And on a summer evening you will hear the rhythmic thump-thump of the churn, a sound that has echoed across this landscape for 1,000 years, as a family makes their Airag. The ancient Budog method of cooking a marmot from the inside out lives on in a celebratory dish called korkog, where lamb and vegetables are cooked in a sealed milk churn with the same superheated stones. It is a direct, unbroken line to the past, but the influence spreads far beyond the steppe. Consider the humble beef jerky, a global snack found in gas stations and supermarkets everywhere. While many cultures developed forms of dried meat, the specific tradition of a tough, lightweight, and incredibly durable jerky, as the ultimate travel food, was perfected and popularized by the Mongols. Their conquests spread the concept of this ultra-efficient military ration across a continent. A similar story can be told of yogurt. While not the inventors, the Mongols and the Turkic peoples they absorbed were masters of fermented dairy. Their empire acted as a great cultural conduit, helping to spread the love of these sour, probiotic-rich foods from Central Asia, westward, into Russia and Eastern Europe. The very word yogurt is Turkic in origin. Every time you eat a cup of it, you're tasting the legacy of a nomadic lifestyle. The spread of dumplings is another clear historical fact. The concept of wrapping a savory filling in a small pocket of dough born in China was carried across Asia and into Europe by the Mongol network. This led directly to the development of beloved national dishes like Russian pelmeni, Turkish manti, and Polish pierogi. All culinary cousins, all sharing a common ancestor whose journey was enabled by the empire. The more controversial theory, which culinary historians love to debate, is that Marco Polo brought noodles back to Italy from Mongol-controlled China. While pasta likely had its own independent origins in Italy, it's undeniable that the Pax Mongolica facilitated a massive exchange of ideas. And the concept of noodles as a staple food traveled far and wide during this period. Even the popular myth of steak tartare, which claims it originated from warriors tenderizing raw meat under their saddles, is part of this legacy. As you know, they were tenderizing dried borts, not raw steak, and the dish itself is a much later European invention. But the power of the story, the image of the rugged horseman and his unique foodways, was so strong that it created a legend that has lasted for centuries. From the communal hot pot of East Asia, an echo of the shared Mongol cauldron, to the savory yogurt drinks of the Middle East, the culinary DNA of the steppe is woven into the fabric of the modern world in ways you might never have expected. The echoes of your journey ripple through the centuries, finding their way into modern kitchens and onto dinner plates thousands of miles away. But here, as the sun finally touches the horizon, those echoes fade, replaced by the immediate, overwhelming reality of the steppe itself. You are back where you started, a solitary figure in a sea of grass. The sky is a riot of deep orange and purple. The wind, your constant companion, has softened to a cool, gentle whisper. The only sounds are the soft tearing of grass as the horses graze and the distant crackle of the evening fire. You hold a bowl in your hands, the last meal of our journey together. It is a simple stew, the familiar shoal, The broth is warm against your palms. You lift it and take a sip. You can taste the deep, savory flavor of the Borts, the rich, buttery essence of the tallow, and the faint, sour tang of the Aaruul that was crumbled in to brighten it. It is not a historical curiosity. It is not a piece of evidence in a scholarly debate. It is dinner. It is the taste of this place, the distilled flavor of survival. Looking into the dying flames, you reflect on the profound ingenuity you have witnessed. The Mongol food system was not a cuisine of choice, but one of brutal, elegant necessity. It was a series of brilliant answers to the relentless questions posed by this unforgiving land. How do you make the fleeting gift of milk last for a year? You turn it into stone. How do you carry the meat of an entire cow on a single horse? You dry it until it is as hard as wood. How do you survive a winter that can freeze a man in his saddle? You render the fat and drink it like a potion of warmth. What is clear, from the many accounts of travelers who witnessed it firsthand, is that this diet was a source of endless fascination for the outside world. The smoky, slightly sour smell of the camp, a scent that a stranger might find unpleasant, has become the comforting smell of home. This is the ultimate lesson of the Mongol pantry, that resilience is not just about enduring hardship, but about transforming it. It's about taking the few things a harsh world offers, milk, meat, grass, and wind, and creating from them a system so powerful it could fuel the conquest of that world. Historians will forever debate whether the Mongols were a destructive or a unifying force. But as you sit here, under a sky now filled with 1 billion sharp, cold stars, you understand on a deeper level. You understand the quiet, stubborn, and deeply human strength required to simply make a warm meal at the end of a long day, here at the edge of the world. And now, as the last embers of the fire begin to fade into the deep velvet darkness of the steppe night, the story, too, draws to a close. The immense, silent landscape around you begins to soften at the edges, the sharp horizon blurring into the star-dusted sky. The cool whisper of the wind is a steady, gentle lullaby, a timeless sound that has soothed generations of herders to sleep beneath these same constellations. There are no more journeys to be made tonight, no more challenges to face. There is only the quiet, the peace of the vast and empty land, and the feeling of a well-earned rest settling deep into your bones. Let the rhythmic breathing of the sleeping horses be a comfort, a sign that all is well. Allow your own thoughts to drift and wander, moving with the slow, peaceful rhythm of the wind as it combs through the endless ocean of grass. The tale is told, and now there is only stillness.